Japanese whiskey was not Japanese from the beginning. At first, it was Scottish notebooks, smells, and stubborn ambition poured into small bottles on Japanese soil. When those bottles crossed 100 years and began winning the world, people started asking a harder question. When did this borrowed craft become truly Japanese whiskey? The story starts not at a bar counter, but in damp Scottish notebooks. In 1918, Masataka Taketsuru listened to chemistry in Glasgow and then knocked on distillery doors beyond the classroom. At Longmorn, he learned malt whiskey, and near Bo'ness he gathered grain whiskey details that turned into notes each night. The first seed of Japanese whiskey was handwriting carried across the sea. Shinjiro Torii understood what those notes could become. In 1923, he built the first malt whiskey distillery in Japan at Yamazaki, not far from Osaka. Taketsuru handled the equipment, pot stills, and production, while Torii dreamed of whiskey Japanese people would actually drink. They worked inside the same warehouse, but they were already looking toward different endings. But the first bottle did not open to applause. In 1929, Shirofuda became the first authentic whiskey made in Japan. But for many drinkers, it felt too unfamiliar and too Scottish. Torii wanted a glass that would be poured again at the table, but the market quietly set the glass down. The first page of Japanese whiskey carried silence before success. This is where the first split appears. Torii searched for a path into Japanese tables and drinking rituals, while Taketsuru struggled to let go of the serious whiskey he had learned in Scotland. In 1934, Taketsuru went north to Yoichi and founded Dai Nippon Kaju. One dream separated into Yamazaki and Yoichi. To Taketsuru, Yoichi looked like a small Scotland hidden inside Japan. It had cold air, mist, and water, but whiskey still demanded time. The company survived on apple products, while the spirit in the warehouse slowly grew older. Then, in 1940, Nikka whiskey finally came out of the cask, carrying the Nai and Ka of Nippon Kaju. Meanwhile, Torii answered in another way. In 1937, Kakubin entered the center of Japanese drinking life with its square bottle and gentle balance. People did not have to study a difficult imported drink, because whiskey began meeting their own food and their own glasses. A spirit learned from Scotland was taking on a different body inside the rhythm of Japan. So the rivalry between Suntory and Nikka was never just a sales fight. One side built a glass people would keep pouring, while the other guarded the weight of the source in a northern warehouse. It is not easy to say whether the whiskey that sold more was more real, or whether the standard that endured longer was more real. The word real holds onto memory and choices longer than flavor alone. For a long time, Japanese whiskey looked like a drink mostly kept inside Japan. But in 2001, Yoichi 10-year single cask drew global attention. And in 2015, Yamazaki Sherry Cask 2013 was called the World Whiskey of the Year. At that moment, the question turned around. Japanese whiskey learned from Scotland had become a whiskey that could shake Scotland. The more famous the name became, the darker the shadow behind it grew. Before 2021, Japanese whiskey did not have the sharp production standard people expect today. Whiskey from outside Japan could be bottled in Japan, while consumers first saw Japanese scenery and Japanese names. While the world applauded, a hazy gap remained between the promise on the front label and the history inside the bottle. That is why the Japan Spirits and Liqueurs Makers Association drew a line around the name in 2021. Under that standard, Japanese whiskey requires Japanese water saccharification, fermentation, and distillation at a Japanese distillery, at least 3 years of aging in Japan, and bottling in Japan at 40% or higher. The transition for older labels continued until March 31, 2024. The name Japanese whiskey now asks for the time the liquid passed through, not just a beautiful mountain on a label. So this war does not end with whether Suntory or Nikka won. It remains the story of whether a craft learned in Scotland earned a new name through Japanese water, time, and taste. The next time you lift a highball, the fight inside that bottle may have been over the name before the flavor. Good whiskey stays on the tongue, but the word real makes you follow the time behind the bottle.